Liam Angel. What I remember the most when I think about Liam and my strongest, biggest memory about him is the moment I delivered him.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us. We are so excited to be joined today by Anna, and we're so grateful that she has taken the time to tell her story about Liam. So welcome, Anna. Thanks for coming on today and for being willing to take this time.
Thank you, Winter, for having me. Thank you for the opportunity to share my and Liam's story.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so before we get started, let's just jump in a little bit about who you are. Who are you? Where are you guys from? And tell me about what your family looks like at the time that Liam was born, just so we can get an idea of who you are.
Sure, yeah. I was born and raised in Honduras. I have a mixed family, mixed background. My mom is from the Chicago area. My dad is from Honduras. They met when my mom was in Honduras in the Peace Corps.
Oh, cool.
Got married and had
Yeah,
4 kids.
yeah.
Um, I graduated high school in Honduras, and then I came to the United States for college. And I went to Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois.
Okay.
From there, I went to DC to be an AmeriCorps after a summer in the Netherlands as an au pair.
Oh man.
And yeah, then I moved to the Chicago area where I had a brother living. He was going to college here, and I've stayed in the Chicago area ever since. So I've been in the United States as a full-time resident since for the last like 17 years.
Okay.
I go back to Honduras regularly, at least once a year.
Great.
And when I got pregnant with Liam, I was living in in Chicago. I was working at a perinatal center. And I was living in an apartment with a random roommate and my boyfriend at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so decided at that point, well, I can't really have a baby in an apartment with a random roommate. So moved to the suburbs where I have some relatives to be closer to family. Bought a house out here, and my partner and I moved out here. And that's where I still live now.
Okay.
And since then, my partner and I have separated.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. And then also just a little bit of context. How long ago was Liam born? So at the time of this recording.
7 years ago,
Okay.
almost exactly. His birthday was just on September 29th.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's some great context there. Okay. And so you have family in Honduras, you have family in Chicago, and so is your dad back in Honduras? I mean, dad and mom in Honduras, where are they at?
Yeah, my parents both still live there.
Okay, awesome. And what do you like to do in your spare time? I know that you're busy with a lot of different projects, but like what are some things that you like to do for hobbies, just so that we know who you are as a person?
I like to bike, and
Oh,
I
nice.
primarily do that at the gym. So I
Mm-hmm.
like going to the gym, exercising, spending time with my now 5-year-old, my rainbow baby,
Mm-hmm.
going on different adventures, exploring new things. I love traveling. I don't get to do that enough.
I
But
know.
like I said, I at least go to Honduras once a year, so that's my
Yeah.
my big travel for the year, and try to squeeze in even little trips outside of that, and spending time with friends and family.
Yeah. That's great. I think
And a weird thing that I enjoy is like organizing and cleaning.
I don't think it's weird. It can be a hobby. I mean, people love that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
well, very cool. Thank you very much for sharing a little bit about that. Okay, so at the time that you got pregnant, you had your partner, your boyfriend, at the time, and was that something you guys were trying to? Were you trying to get pregnant, or was that just something that was a little bit of a surprise?
It was very much a surprise.
Yeah, okay,
We
okay.
we were we were not trying to get pregnant, and in fact, at the time, I was ready to break up with him.
Oh,
It was
okay,
not a great relationship. I was ready to end it, and then I ended up pregnant instead.
okay.
Yeah, big surprise. But I kind of I had always thought like that eventually I'd want to become a mom.
Mhm,
Um, and at the time, everything besides my relationship was going really well.
mhm.
And so I just sort of decided, well, I guess the universe says that now I'm going to become a mom and just went into mom planning mode.
Cool. Now, and did your boyfriend at the time, did you guys end up staying together because of that, or was that something that you or was like, "Well, I'm just gonna do this on my own," kind of a thing?
So he had two children before me,
Uh-huh.
and he wasn't the greatest dad to them either. So when I found out I was pregnant, like the thoughts of like, what am I going to do definitely crossed my mind. And I
Right.
thought about, well, given his history with his other children, I'm more than likely going to end up doing this on my own. And I was okay with that. I was like, well, I can do it. I have a stable job. I have a supportive family and friend network, and I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we didn't stay together specifically for the pregnancy, for the baby.
Okay.
But we hadn't broken up yet, right? So I was still, I think, a little bit in of a like gray area. Like I was
Yeah.
kind of on the fence, like leaning towards breaking up. And then when I got pregnant, I was like, okay, well, let's keep trying. And he was actually um great when it came to the pregnancy. He went with me to all the
Oh,
prenatal appointments and was
okay.
very involved in the pregnancy. So definitely a lot of ups and downs throughout the pregnancy and our relationship otherwise, but he was very supportive of our soon to be, you know, son together. So
Yeah. Okay, so when you found out that you were pregnant, I guess maybe tell me how you found out. Was that just kind of like, "Oh, I missed a period," or how how did that transpire when you found out that you were pregnant?
so it was like, yeah, I missed a period, but I wasn't great at tracking my period at the
Mhm.
time, and
Mhm.
I had recently um gotten off the birth control that I was taking because it was causing me to have lots of unwanted symptoms.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know, I like attributed some of that to like, oh, well, maybe it's my hormones changing because of coming off of that birth control, um, or my cycle just like re-regulating
Right.
itself.
Right.
But then I started getting other symptoms like sore boobs. I was extremely tired,
Mhm.
which is not normally a feeling that I have. So it was like really unusual to me. And it was
Yeah.
like tired to the point of like, I need to take a nap. Like I cannot stay awake.
Yeah.
Those were really the only symptoms, like sore boobs and being extremely tired. And so then like all that combined, I was kind of like, well, maybe I should take a pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And then I did, and right away, uh, pregnant.
Yeah. That was probably a very big surprise for you. Okay, and then
Yeah.
so when you found out then, told the boyfriend, and did you end up telling anybody else, your family members, that type of thing? Was that something that you shared with them right away, or was that was there anything that you guys were considering, like either waiting for a little while before telling people?
Yeah. So, again, I was working in the perinatal field at that point, and so I think it's pretty common knowledge. Like a lot of, I shouldn't even say common knowledge. Like it's a common thing people think or say is like, oh, well, wait until this made up magical 12-week mark.
Yes.
And I wasn't thinking like in terms of that sort of
Mhm.
old wives' tale thing, but
Right.
I was just thinking of like my job. And part of my job was a big part of my job was the data collection and analysis of the perinatal morbidity and mortality statistics for our 8 network hospitals. So
Oh,
like
really?
immediately the
Yeah.
reality of pregnancy loss was there for me. And so I wasn't prepared to tell people even after the magical 12-week mark. It took
Yes.
me a long time before I felt ready to tell people. And I started, kind of slowly telling people over time. But I really didn't tell many people at all early on.
Gotcha.
My boyfriend actually was starting to share with people before I was
Mhm.
ready. And so that it made me upset. It's like, why are you telling people? I don't want
Yeah.
to tell people.
Yeah.
And I think part of that too was my, fear of what was going to happen with the relationship also, and like unsure of where I wanted that to go. And
Gotcha.
just a lot of things that I was thinking about and considering. And so um, it was some time before I started telling people.
Yeah. Well, I did not realize that you were specifically in charge of reporting that data, and that a lot of women have told me that they have never like considered stillbirth. They never knew that this was a thing still in this day and age, and so for you to be very involved in that and to have that as a forefront in your mind, I'm sure it would be one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, I work in reporting stillbirth and reporting infant deaths, and so
Yeah.
that would be that's a lot.
Yeah, I knew that the survival of my baby wasn't guaranteed from the
Hmm.
moment that I found out I was pregnant.
Yeah. Yep. And that is it's a sobering fact when you realize that now as having gone through that type of loss. Okay, so then did you end up getting care at the place that you work then? I how
No,
did that
no.
work? I was like, I don't know exactly how that works out. So tell me a little bit how you when you went in and what those first appointments look like.
Yeah, I thought about that and I pretty quickly determined. I was like, no, I don't want like my coworkers to be
So
looking,
involved.
yes, like so intimately involved in my pregnancy.
Yeah.
Great resource, great tool to have for asking questions and addressing concerns and things.
Yes.
But I was like, I don't need them to know every single detail inside and out about my pregnancy.
Right, right.
So
Okay.
no, and also because of all the knowledge that I had about pregnancy and birth, I from the beginning also very intentional about like kind of my birth plan and like knowing that I wanted a more holistic approach. And
Okay.
so I ended up choosing to go with a midwifery practice.
Okay.
Um, and there were only, a couple of options in the area at the time. So that's who I ended up going with.
Great. And how did that first appointment look? Was it everything looked okay? Labs and everything were
Yeah.
fine?
Yep. Yep. At that appointment and every appointment after that, everything was always great, normal,
Looked
everything was good.
everything was up to speed. Okay, so you're still feeling kind of tired. Any other symptoms that you were kind of noticing once you realized you were pregnant? Any morning sickness or
No,
anything like that?
no, no, actually, I was like, I don't know what people complain about when they're pregnant. This is super easy.
You're like, I got this. I'll just take a nap
Like this
and
is
we're fine.
like I was expanding physically, but other than that, I really didn't have any of the kind of common pregnancy symptoms. And
Yeah,
I was a dancer at the time, and so I continued to do my dance until I was
great.
35 weeks pregnant with my big old belly. And it wasn't until the end when I really started feeling like the physical symptoms of pregnancy, just like the weight of my belly hurting,
Right.
those types of symptoms, but nothing like morning sickness or, I probably had some mood swings and stuff like hormonal stuff going on that, other people probably noticed more than I did, but
But nothing
it was
drastic, right?
easy.
It sounds
Yeah,
like.
no, it was real easy for me.
Okay. Oh, I was gonna ask, do you know about how far along you were when you finally found out when you were pregnant?
Oh yeah, I was early.
Okay.
I was like 4 to 6 weeks pregnant.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
it was really early on. Yeah.
Okay. And then, okay, so then when did you do any sort of genetic testing? Because I know a lot of people will go get some genetic testing done at like, 10 weeks or so. It was that anything that you wanted to do, or you're like, oh, I'll just wait till anatomy scan time?
Yeah, no, there was no indication for it at the time. I
Okay.
was I was 28, I think, and healthy and had no family history of any type of complication in pregnancy,
Okay.
so that would
In
require any kind of genetic testing. So
Okay. Great.
nope, at that
Um,
time.
and then when you guys went in for the anatomy scan, tell me how that went and if there was any concerns when the tech was running through things.
Nope, just like every other appointment, every other test, every other scan, everything was normal,
Okay.
fine. He was looking
Normal.
good, growing appropriately, fluid looked good, everything
Yeah.
was good.
And I'm assuming that at that time you guys found out that it was gonna be a boy.
We actually found out before.
Oh.
Yeah, because I had a friend of a friend who worked as an ultrasound tech at another facility, and so I had gone, just kind of like covertly and had that scan because I wanted to do a gender reveal with my family.
Mhm.
So I had them, put the results in an envelope, and then we had our little gender reveal.
Super fun. Was that in the Chicago area then? Like, family came in, or did you go to Honduras for that?
That was in the Chicago area because I
Okay.
remember we were, sitting around the living room at my grandma's house and doing these little like scratch offs of boy or
Oh,
girl.
super fun. Okay. So, were you expecting a boy? Were you expecting a girl? Like, did you have any
I didn't have any
specific feeling?
expectations, and nor did I have any like desire for one or the other.
Okay. Okay. When
Yeah.
you did find out that you were having a boy, though, any did you guys have a list of names, or was that something that you guys talked about, you and your partner at the time?
We did talk about it, and ultimately Liam was my choice. And the reason why I chose Liam primarily was because for some reason I always had it in my mind that I would want to name my daughter Leah. And I was like,
Oh.
oh, it's a boy. So Liam, at the time, I was also a big fan of Shameless. And there is a Liam on Shameless. And I think that was kind of like my introduction to that name, or like what most familiarized me with the name Liam. And I was like, oh yeah, I like that. I'll go with Liam. And it was important for me that the name could be easily said in English and Spanish because we like a few other ideas were thrown out there,
Oh.
but I was like, no, that name. If a person who doesn't speak English tries to say that name and they pronounce it like it's in Spanish, that'll sound terrible. So those are were immediately discarded. But Liam works in both languages, and it was a adaptation of Leah, which was the
Yeah.
one name I had always wanted to name my child, and
That
so
is
then he
awesome.
became Liam. And then we didn't have a middle name picked out, and so it wasn't until he was born an angel that we decided to name him Liam Angel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a sweet name. Okay,
Thank you.
so everything's looking good, and then you're still dancing, you're feeling okay, all the appointments are looking okay, and so tell me when kind of what happened when you transpired and when you found out things were not the way things should be.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, it was completely unexpected. There was no sign that anything was wrong, that anything was off. You know, he was born on his due date. So, because my parents lived in Honduras, my mom came up to kind of help me
Right.
finish getting ready and just to be there just in case he came early. And then my dad came up, a couple weeks before my due date, also to be there to be ready for his birth. This was their first grandson. They had a granddaughter
Oh,
first.
uh-huh.
It was their first grandson, so a little bit of added excitement with that. And my first child too, and I'm their
Yes.
only daughter. So some different sort of things that made it a little extra special. But
Mhm.
I mean, they would be and have been there for all of their grandchildren's births. But yeah, they were coming up. Everyone was getting ready and excited, and I remember we were sitting there as a family talking and like um placing unofficial bets on like when the actual date would be, and kind of joking around about that, and who would be right and who would win. And um Sunday we went on a campus tour for my brother for the college he was going to be starting. No, I'm sorry. It was college he was in. He'd started that year, and so it was like a family day at the university,
Oh,
so the
yeah,
family
okay.
could see the campus. Yeah, and so just walking around campus all day. I remember by the time we got to like the lunch spot, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to sit down. My belly hurts. And then the next day, Monday morning, I woke up and I was getting ready for work. And normally, by the time, I get up, shower, I'm getting dressed, I feel him moving around. I feel him
Mhm.
kicking me. He was always
Mhm.
very active. And so at one point in the morning, I noticed, I'm like, he hasn't kicked me yet. That's unusual. And so I called my midwife practice, and I told them that I was concerned about that he usually is very active. And
Yeah.
by this point, I would have felt the kick. And they were really dismissive of my concerns. And at the time, I didn't even
Mhm.
recognize it as them being dismissive of my concerns because I didn't know any better,
Yeah.
despite all the knowledge I had because of my profession.
Yeah.
I had never been pregnant. And so I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like. And I just trusted who I'm supposed to trust with my and my baby's life, my midwife, right? And so
Yeah.
they said, well, it's normal. He's probably just running out of room. You're almost at your due date. So, just take it easy and
Mm.
give us a call if anything changes. And I was like, okay. Well, and I felt like I still was feeling sort of like slight movements and
Mm.
I ended up calling off of work that day. I said that I just wasn't feeling well and so then I took it easy the rest of the day, as they said, and I was carefully monitoring his movement throughout the day, and nothing changed. I felt like I could continue to sort of feel like these slight movements, and their instruction was if anything changes, call us, and nothing changed. And
Uh,
so went to bed, woke up the next morning, again getting ready for work, and I'm like, no, I still haven't felt him kick, and I didn't feel him kick all day yesterday. And
yeah.
call my midwife again, and they said, okay, well, if you're concerned, you can come in if you want.
Mm.
Again, still just very like, it wasn't a big deal to them, right? Like it was just totally normal.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, again, I moved like halfway through my pregnancy. And so I was on the north side of the city and I moved to the far south suburbs, which equates to a time distance of about an hour, hour and a half sometimes in
Oh,
rush hour
okay.
traffic. So
Yeah.
I told them, I was like, all right, well, I have to go all the way there from here. It's going to take me over an hour probably. And they're like, okay, it's fine. We'll be here. I'm like, okay. So we get in the car, make our way up to the hospital. And, I'm just sitting there. My partner was driving and he had been home with me. He stayed home with me the whole day before since I was kind of concerned about that. And so was he. And so we were just kind of together taking it easy and paying attention to Liam's movements. And he's driving and I'm just like holding my belly all the way to the hospital and just like asking him to move, asking God to make him move, asking for everything to be okay. And we arrived to the hospital and I remember thinking at one point like, oh, today's a nice day to have a baby. So I kind of
Huh.
went into thinking like, oh, maybe it's just that he's like ready to come out. Like
Yeah.
he's okay. Like he just needs to come out and I'll have him today and I'll deliver him today. And
Mhm.
um, check in and they're just like taking their sweet time. And I'm just like, can we get through these like checklist questions like quicker, please? Like we need to check on the baby. I
Yeah.
didn't say this out loud. I'm just like thinking that. I'm just like, oh, hurry up. And they're, taking my blood pressure and this and that and asking me all the questions. And it's like, okay. And then finally they get me into the room where they then try to start putting the fetal monitors on my belly.
Mhm.
And usually his heartbeat was found like so fast, just immediately.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And then, another person tried. And so I think it might have even been like a medical assistant who was first or something. And then a nurse, and then another nurse, and then a resident, and then the midwife. And so all these people later, about halfway through, especially knowing what I know from my job, I was like, something is wrong.
Yeah.
I knew something was wrong right away because his heartbeat was always so easy to find.
Mhm.
But then, person after person, and they're not saying anything, and they're just trying to find the heartbeat. And then the midwife sort of mumbles to the nurse, like, oh, we need to get, so and so, or we need to call so and so in here. And so and so, being the attending physician,
Yeah.
comes in, tries to find the heartbeat, and and I remember this like so distinctly, so vividly, like, they're just all standing over me, right? And like the doctor just looked over to my midwife and just shook her head. And so that's when like that was my confirmation, right? And so that's when, we just lost it. And I think like I realized it before my partner did too. Like he was, a couple seconds behind me and realizing what had happened. And
Oh.
that's yeah, that's how it went down. That's how we found out.
Oh. What was your reaction? Like what did you and your partner do after they told you or shook their head and
Yeah,
said,
after they shook their head over me,
"Yeah."
then the midwife sort of, then she turns to me and held my hand and, told me like I'm so sorry. I don't even remember like the exact words that were said. Like because I already knew, right? Like I already, they didn't have to say any words.
Yeah.
But, just confirming with words that he had died. And I remember though, what she did say was like, I was so looking forward to meeting your baby. And then they said, we're going to give you some time to think about what you want to do. And they offered us the option of staying in the hospital to be induced or to go home and wait to go into labor naturally.
Hmm.
So everybody cleared out the room. And then my partner actually ended up leaving too. And so then I'm just like in the room by myself. And I didn't have to think much about what I wanted to do. I was like, I don't want to go home with my dead baby inside me. Like, no, like I just and wait who knows how long to go into
Yeah.
labor naturally. And plus I knew the risks of that too. And knowing that if I don't go into labor naturally, well then I'm gonna come and I have to be induced anyway. So
Yeah.
I stayed and was admitted to be induced. And as they were kind of getting all that paperwork together to move me into a room, I started to call family.
Mm.
And the first phone call I made was actually to my boss. I called my job. And I called them because I was like, I have learned a lot on paper about pregnancy and infant loss, and I know the steps of delivery, and I know all this information. What I have not learned in my time at that job was like, what do you do when it happens? Because I was just looking at data and charts and preparing cases for review and preparing, helping to prepare classes for nurses and doctors and things like, but we never talked about like what
Yeah.
actually happens to that family
Yeah.
when they're going through that. So I was like, I don't know what to do now. Like what? So I called them and I told them. They offered to call my family for me, but I wanted to do that. So then the next call I made was to my aunt, excuse me, who has a background in psychology. So I was like, she makes the most sense to call right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I told her first, and then she spread the news to the rest of my family. Um and then, in that time, they made their way over to the hospital right away. Eventually, I got moved into the room, and then family started trickling in.
Did your partner come back? Because I know you said he left.
Oh yeah.
And then so did he come back or did he just need to like did he need a moment? Because
He needed a
this
moment. Yeah,
okay,
no, he
because I
came
was
back.
like
He
I
came
was
back.
like, this is a lot of information. So okay, so he came back and was he calling his family? Did he involve them as well so that they knew what was going on?
He did, yeah. He called his close friends and family and let them know what was going on.
Okay. So you now have told everybody that, and they're starting to come. And thank goodness this was pre-COVID time, so that you could actually have a number of people in the hospital room. So that's, I guess, a blessing right there. Uh,
Yeah.
so you do get started on getting induced. Is that right at this
Hmm.
time? Okay.
Yeah, but there's a story behind that too.
Okay. Let's hear it.
So because I decided to go with, more, you want a more holistic, more,
Yeah.
baby friendly approach and minimal interventions. I wanted all of that, right? And so the hospital I was at was a lower level hospital, and they're not accustomed to seeing 40-week stillbirths and
Yeah.
um, any other type of complications. Really, they didn't know what to do at first, and they were not discreet about that. They literally told me like, "Well, we're waiting to hear from our so and so about what to do," and I'm like, "You induced me as you would induce any other person who's 39 weeks and 5 days pregnant.
Yeah.
The benefit is that you don't have to worry about killing my baby because he's already dead."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, okay, we're just waiting." I'm like, "It's the same protocol. Just induce me. Give me the
Yeah.
medicine."
Yeah. Just get started.
Um, but yeah, that did not give me much reassurance that things would go very well for me. That they didn't even know what to do, and they were just
Just twiddling. I mean,
lost
yeah.
themselves. I'm like,
That's not good.
um, so they eventually got confirmation that they just needed to do what you normally do to induce anybody, and then they started with induction.
Okay. And about what time was this now? Like, 'cause when did you get to the hospital and when you found out?
We got to the hospital, it was probably around 10 in the morning.
Okay. And this was on
Uh,
Tuesday, right?
this was
Okay.
Tuesday.
The
Yeah.
Tuesday of that week. And then when did they finally start the induction? Like, sounded like it
The
took a long time.
So I know that the phone call I made to my aunt was around 1 p.m. because we actually talked about it later that she was supposed to be going into a meeting at that time and then ended up getting the call from me, of
Mm,
course, canceled her meeting and everything and left. Um, and then between, the paperwork to get me admitted and get me into the room and actually figure out what they needed to be doing, um, like the actual, like getting the medication in my IV probably started around 3, 4, but I don't
okay.
remember the
Okay.
exact time or anything, but sometime that afternoon,
Okay. Okay. And how did your labor progress then once you started with the medicine?
slowly, very slowly.
Really?
Yeah.
You
Yeah, and
weren't you
they
you didn't have any contractions or anything up until that point, and were you dilated at all or anything?
I wasn't feeling any contractions,
Mhm.
um, but per the monitor, I was starting to have
Oh,
some contractions, but nothing that I was feeling. I was starting to slowly dilate, but it was moving slowly.
okay. So just tell me how that progressed then. Did it finally ramp up or what
Um,
happened?
so no, so that was Tuesday, and then so I was laboring all day Tuesday, walking the halls, trying different practices to try and advance dilation and making very slow progress on that. And the hospital providers, they wanted to do more, add more interventions, and I
Yeah.
was pushing against that. And thankfully, with the help of my doula, um, we were able to not have them do
Yeah.
unnecessary interventions. And
Basically do what you
um,
wanted to do. So, and that's
yeah,
the purpose of a
yeah,
doula is to have an advocate for you while you are in the middle of this process.
yes, yes. And so then my doula, in the evening, she said, well, why don't you take just a nice warm shower. It'll help
Oh,
relax you. We'll turn off the lights. You can play some music. A good friend of mine had sent me this like relaxing monk music. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll play that. So I played that
yeah.
in the shower. And, she was kind of rubbing my back in the shower. My partner was, and just enjoying the warm water. And so then I get out of the shower and just had put my change of clothes on. And as soon as I put my change of clothes on, of course, my water breaks.
Of
Um,
course.
So, had to change again, but, right when my water broke was when it was, like, immediately intense nonstop contractions
Okay.
ensued, and so I pushed through those for a little while, and, um, at some point, somebody said, like, "You're going through enough, you're suffering enough, like, why put yourself through
Mm,
this? Like, just
mm,
get an epidural." And so that kind of was what ultimately convinced me to be like, "Yeah, you're right. I guess I don't need to feel so much physical pain on top of that." Plus, I felt like I couldn't even really be present in the experience because I was just so consumed by this, like, nonstop pain.
right.
Um, so I got an epidural, and then as soon as that took effect, then I was able to finish dilating.
Okay.
Um, and then I was in active labor. I was pushing for over 3 hours. It took
Oh.
of pushing, yeah, to finally deliver Liam, and he was born at 3:26 in the morning,
Oh.
right
Wow.
on his due date. And I remember laying there and feeling like, you've given birth, like you can like feel like you're almost done. Like you can feel the baby's almost out of your body. And um I knew I was about there. And so then I just kind of like look around the room and it's so quiet and I'm still holding on to that hope of it, like he's gonna come out and be alive. And I don't know if like everyone was kind of hoping,
Yeah.
holding on to that.
Yeah.
There's just like the silence. And then comes out, no sound, And I for those last couple pushes just remember like staring into my midwife's eyes, and her eyes just filled with tears, and he's born and her tears start pouring, my tears start pouring. And I also remember specifically like looking up at the clock. There's like a clock right in front of the bed, and seeing that it was, past midnight, and that he was. So I was like, okay, so he was born on his due date, and that fact was like important to me, or like it felt like some type of accomplishment or something,
Yeah.
or maybe it was just like it's easier to say 40 weeks than 39 weeks and 6 days. But I do remember like looking at the clock and being like, okay, like it's September 29th, it's his due date. He's born on his due date.
Yeah.
And even in that moment, like, of course, it's, beyond devastating. There are no words for that moment. But at the same time that I felt like the worst a parent can feel, I also felt like joy that I gave birth to this beautiful
Yeah.
baby,
Yeah.
and that I it was hard work. I was proud of myself for getting through that, and um also like, happy to meet my baby. Not in the way that I wanted, but I got to see him, I got to meet him, I got to hold him, and
Yeah.
he was so beautiful and perfect and looked so much like his dad.
Yay. Yeah, I don't think people realize how there is, yes, this unbelievable sadness, unbelievable heartbreak, but then as a woman having like giving birth is a big deal. Like that is, yes, a lot of work. You
Yeah.
did that, and yeah. So yes, there is definitely some joy there too, and so
Mm.
such an odd feeling where sadness and joy were living together in a single moment, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think not a lot of people know that like when a baby is born alive, like they're helping to push themselves out,
Yes.
and so when a baby's born dead, they're not, like it's all on you. It's all on you and the work you're putting into to birthing that baby. And
Yeah.
so that just made me feel like that much more
Yeah.
empowered. Like I think that's, the epitome of like feeling empowered, that I did this all on my own. It was all me and my body, and
Yeah.
pushing through this, and um with the help of my support people, right? My
Yes.
my doula more than my partner. He was he wasn't that much help. I remember, um, having one person holding each of my legs,
Yeah.
and my partner holding my leg at one time, and just kind of like like rolling his eyes, like he was tired, and I'm like, "You're tired."
Yeah. What do you think I've been doing?
I've been pushing for 2 hours. But the doula handled that very well. She's like, "Yeah, you take a break. I'll take your place.
G
I'll help her."
Good job, that was good.
The midwife was was really helpful, and even my doula commented on how the midwife was really being like so gentle and caring and helpful, and she specifically commented on how she's like, I've never seen someone do so much to prevent any tearing from happening. Like she was
Oh,
really being very mindful of that, and I was like, well, good, I
yeah.
didn't, so
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
That's another thing that would, yeah,
um
that would be good.
yeah, and so yeah, that moment of that grief and that joy, and in that, that's what I've come to learn over the years is I tell everyone, I'm like, grief and joy coexist, and they do for me every single day. And that
Yeah.
moment was the introduction to that, and I didn't even know
Yeah.
that. I didn't know that both could exist, and will exist probably for the rest of my life.
Yep. Yep. Anna, I'm curious, did you express like like your preferences for when he was born? Like were you going to do skin to skin right away? Were you going to have him cleaned up, or what were your preferences that you wanted to happen?
My pre-stillbirth preferences were immediate skin to
Mhm.
skin, delayed cord clamping, yes, all of that crunchy
Okay.
mama stuff. And um I still wanted that, I
Yeah.
still wanted that plan to be honored and those wishes to be honored. And I didn't exactly get that. I think because not only that hospital being inexperienced with stillbirth, but all hospitals. I think it happens
Yes.
too often that what happened was he was born. I saw him, and they immediately whisked him away,
Oh,
and they did wipe him up and wrap him up in a blanket, and then gave him to me.
okay.
And that hurt me when they just like took him away immediately. Like they didn't ask me or anything. They didn't. They just took him.
Mm,
Um, that was another like kind of immediate moment of like sadness. Like, oh, I didn't want that. Like I wanted to hold my baby immediately. Um, and then I didn't even get like the true like skin to skin moment that I had envisioned either. They'd wrapped him up in a blanket and
yes.
then gave him to me. And then from there, like I was fearful of like unwrapping him too much or manipulating his body too much. And it was such like I was torn in that moment because I was
Yeah.
like, I know he can't feel this. I know it's not hurting him, but he had some like I'm going to say maceration because that's the actual term, right? But like some
Yeah.
slight like tearing on his skin and stuff. And like, I just didn't want to make that worse, even though logically I knew he couldn't feel it. I knew he
Yes.
wasn't hurting. It still like hurt me to see him like that or to be the reason why any of that got worse. I just kind of like let him be. And I did, unwrap him and I did look at him and we did put clothes on him and all that so gently and carefully to try and just like minimize any further damage to his body and his skin.
Yeah.
Um, but like again, like I just wish I would have had that, that skin to skin moment. I wish they wouldn't have whisked him away. I wish they would have like let me still have that experience. And I'm grateful for the experience that I did have, that I
Yeah.
was able to have, as close as possible to sort of like natural birth plan that I had envisioned.
Yeah.
Um, and that some of that still came to fruition.
Hmm.
But once your baby dies, like the whole the whole plan's thrown out the window. Like
Yes. Yes.
everything changes.
Everything
And
changes.
so I got some of what I wanted, some of what I envisioned, and
Hmm.
I think as is the case now, I know, now after having a subsequent live birth and hearing so many birth stories over the years too, like very rarely do birth plans ever go as planned.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when we were going through our birth class, it was like, "Oh, you're going to have a plan, but maybe you should call them preferences because you can state those, but you just never quite know how things are going to go." And stillbirth is one of those things where you're like, "Wow, that one threw us for a loop." And yeah, things changed definitely. So you had all of your family in there. Were you letting anybody hold Liam? I was really
Yes.
possessive, I'm gonna be honest.
Um, I was, but I was in the sense of the being possessive in who I was even allowing to come to the hospital. Like
Okay, okay.
everyone who was there, I allowed to hold him if they wanted to. Um, but it for me it was like I don't even want you to come through the door.
Yes,
Like that's only
yes.
reserved for a select few people. And so there were some people who were great friends who I love dearly, but I said no, I don't think so. Like
Yeah, okay.
because like I think even in that moment we realized too, like, or not even that we realized, but we're just so conditioned to be the entertainers. No, this is like
Oh, yes,
someone comes to your home and you're entertaining them, or like just I didn't want to feel that pressure any more than I already did with the people who were there. And
yes.
so I did have several family members who were present. A priest was there, and he slept on the floor with my family in the waiting room, waiting for him to be born all night so that he could baptize him. Um, and a couple of friends came through as well. And then yeah, anyone who wanted to hold him, I allowed them to, and I'm glad that they did. And I was told after the fact that my dad had originally said that he didn't want to hold him, that he
Oh,
wasn't going to hold him. But then when my dad came in the room and I said, "Do you want to hold him?" He just said yes. And someone asked him afterwards, "Why did you change your mind?" And he said, "Because she asked me." So yeah, it was
that's sweet.
it was so special to see everyone be able to have their moment with him too, because it was the only moment we had with him for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
My partner was actually the most reluctant to hold him, and I had to basically force him to hold him at one point. I was like, "You're not gonna have this opportunity again. Like, you need to hold him. This is your son.
Yeah.
You don't want to regret missing out on that opportunity." So he did. A couple other people sort of told him like, "You have to do this. Do
Yeah.
this." So,
Okay.
and even holding him, he could barely stand to look at him, and like the whole time we had about 6 hours with him.
Yeah.
And a lot of that time, my partner wasn't, you'll see in like some of the photos, like he has his hand on him, but he's looking away.
Oh,
Like it
really?
was really hard for him to face that.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. You just don't know how you're going to react, and there's no judgment because it really, you just don't sometimes don't know what to do, right? And like this, yeah.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. You just don't know what to do. And is that when you guys felt like Angel was a good middle name at this time? Was that when you guys figured out what
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
middle
During
name was
that
gonna be?
time when we were filling out all the paperwork that
Yeah.
they shove at you,
Yeah.
um, it was, yeah, what's the middle name gonna be? And I just said Angel.
Yeah.
Sounds good in English and Spanish. Liam Angel, Liam Angel. So
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's beautiful.
thank you.
So you guys had 6 hours with him. Was the hospital you mentioned earlier that the hospital was so unexperienced with anything like this.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that there was no sort of like limit, or they just didn't know how long you would keep the baby. I mean, like, did they tell you if there was going to be a limit on how long you could have him?
Yes, the limit was dictated by the hospital, and
Okay.
another thing I came to learn later that they didn't need to have that limit.
Oh,
Another thing I didn't know, I was just following directions
yeah.
because it was important to me to have an autopsy. And so they told me, "Well, you can have 6 hours with him, but then he has to go to the morgue because you want an autopsy, and if it's
Okay.
longer, then there'll be changes and yada yada." And I'm like, the pathologist later who sat down with me to go over everything, like, was like, "No, they wouldn't be significant enough that like they would alter the cause of death.
Oh,
You could have spent more time with it." And of course, learning and hearing many
yes.
stories after that from so many families who have the opportunity to spend much more time with their
Yeah.
babies if and when they choose to. Um, so yeah, I wish the hospital wouldn't have been so, genuinely ignorant when it came to how to support a family through a stillbirth.
Yeah.
Um, and all of my experience then inspiring some of the subsequent action and work I've been doing. And at the same time, it's one of those, I wish I had more, and at the same time, I'm grateful that I did have that time and that
Yeah.
I knew to take advantage of that time. Because we also hear so many families that, like, had I been like my partner, we probably would have said, "No, take him away,"
Yeah.
and then we
Wouldn't.
potentially would have lived with that regret of
Yeah.
not spending any time with him.
Yeah.
And I think like there's no amount of time that's enough, right? Like no matter how much time I think a family spends with their baby, everyone always wishes it could be more
Yeah.
because we wish they were here with
Yeah.
us forever.
You're expecting a lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get a day, maybe. You mentioned that you did appreciate the 6 hours that you did have. What other things did you do with Liam to make memories or be able to just spend time with him? What did that look like for you guys?
So, like I said, he was born at 3:26 in the morning, so the
Mhm.
middle of the night. So we've been up all day, all night.
Yeah.
At some point, I tried to take a nap in there, as in before he was born. But then once he
Mhm.
was born, I was immediately like, okay, I know I have a limited time with him. Like,
Mhm.
I was up on my feet immediately and trying to mother him in any way I could think of, and doing the putting clothes on,
Yeah.
and we got a lock of hair too, and even that I cut them, and I was like so scared to again hurt him, but it's not hurting him. Like I could have cut
Yeah.
all of his hair off, and
Yeah.
another thing where it's like, well, I wish I would have gotten more hair. why did I only get two little tiny locks of hair? And he had a full head of
I was
dark
gonna
curly
ask,
hair.
I was like, "You have a lot of hair yourself," and so I'm like, "I bet he had a lot of hair."
He did, yes, he did, yeah. And we got handprints and footprints and not like full like 3D molds, but like impressions.
Yes, okay.
Did some of those. And I think some of the things that we did were limited because supplies were limited. Like the hospital didn't have a lot of supplies for
Oh,
me to do the memory making
yeah.
thing. So it was like my family went out and like bought what they could find. So they could only find two sets of the clay mold, clay
Gotcha.
molds to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
um what else? I mentioned the priest had stayed with my family overnight, sleeping on the waiting room floor to be able to baptize him in the morning. And he had another commitment early that morning. So at about 6 a.m., the
Mhm.
priest of my family came in the room and he was baptized. And my family the night before had gone out to buy a baptismal outfit. And
Oh, good.
even though Liam was a 40-week baby, he was 7.5 pounds and 21 inches
Ooh,
long.
yeah.
He was just swimming in the smallest baptismal outfit they could find. So that was another moment of like, oh, I'm kind of sad that we weren't able to get an appropriate fitting outfit. And
Yeah.
it's also kind of funny to see this baby like in this like giant.
Yeah. You're like, "Oh, that's I guess that's gonna work."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we baptized him and held him and loved on him and mothered him for
Yeah.
6 hours and then we said goodbye.
Oh, that's the worst. Did you guys let me ask really quickly, did you take pictures? Was there any sort of photography service, or were you just, like, snapping pictures with what you had?
We took pictures ourselves with our
Mm.
devices.
Mhm. Yeah.
I had a friend there who had some more advanced photography skills, so she was able to take some, um, I don't know what the terminology is, but, like nice, sweet pictures of me
Yeah.
holding his hand, or ones where like it's not like all they're not all like full blown, like this is all of Liam.
Yes. Yeah.
So she took some nice photographs like that and then we took photos as well. And the hospital attempted to take photos. They had a like those disposable old school cameras.
Yes.
So they took some photos on that, and the nurse who took them was so nervous. They're like blurry. She was shaking, so
Oh, no.
they're not very good. And she took like, I don't know, 5 photos or something. Like it was not
Yeah.
a lot. So thankfully we all took our own
Okay.
photos. They did try to get Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, to have someone come in to take photos for us,
Mhm.
but because of the timing of everything, like him being born at
3
3:30 in
in
the
the morning.
morning and then
Mhm.
only having him for 6 hours, they weren't able to get someone to come during that limited
Yeah.
window.
Yeah. Yeah, understandable. When you did, give him back to be taken, did you decide to do that, or did they tell you, like, "Hey, it's time," or and then tell me how that went?
I'm such a rule follower that I was like carefully monitoring the time. And again, like I didn't want to mess up the autopsy results. So I was like,
Yeah,
okay, they told me 6 hours, like
we'll
six
stick
hours
with
on the
that.
dot.
Okay.
We gotta say goodbye. Like he needs to be preserved for the autopsy. And so I don't remember if it was them coming and saying like, okay, it's time, or I know I didn't like go out the room and like flag someone down to come take him away, but
Yeah,
I was prepared. I was mindful of the time. I realized like, okay, our time is coming to an end. And they took him in a very dignified, respectful way. They put him in the baby carts.
like, little bassinet
Um
thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just wraps him in a blanket so it just looked like they were pushing any baby down the hall. And I just stood in the doorway of my room and watched them wheel him away.
Yeah. It's the worst thing to happen, I think.
Oh, I was just gonna say some sights, some images really stick with us, right? And at the same time, I wonder how long do those images stay there? Like, are there some that will stay forever, or eventually do they all fade? It's
Yeah.
hard to imagine that they will all fade away because
Yeah.
I, hear from people 30, 40, 50, 70 years from their losses who still share stories and those images of their babies and their experiences. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident they'll stay with me. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I look back and I'm like, I've also forgotten some details. And for a while, it was really hurtful to me. And I didn't want to forget any tiny little detail. And now I've gotten to a place where I'm like, I'm okay with that. I'm like, that's just the natural progression of
Yeah.
time and memories. And that's, why things like what you all are doing, allowing us to share our stories are so important. So we have some way of preserving
Yeah.
all of the tiny details that we remember
Yes.
now that we might not remember in 10 years.
Yep, that's exactly why we started this because I wish I had a better memory, and so I just want to preserve things. So I think, yeah, that's exactly why. After he was taken away, did you guys go home that day, or how were you feeling physically? I mean, you had just given birth, so to a 7-pound baby. How
Yeah.
were you feeling?
Well, I jumped up right away. I was
Yeah.
physically feeling fine, or it was like a mind over matter sort of thing where I
Mhm.
maybe ignored whatever was going on physically. Um, and I was not ready. So they took him at like, 9 or 10 in the morning or so.
Yes.
Um, I was not ready to go home.
Mm.
I didn't know what I was going home to or why I was going home. Like I had a home ready to welcome a baby, that I'd had 3 baby showers during my pregnancy. So every room of my house was set up for him. He was born on his due date. The car already had the car seat in it.
Yeah,
I had
all of
the
it.
bassinet set up in my bedroom. His nursery was all set up. There were diaper changing stations upstairs, downstairs. I was just ready for our baby. And that's only my house. We also had setups at other people's houses where we knew we would be spending time. And so
Yeah.
my family took the initiative to, at least in my house, put everything into his nursery.
Okay.
I don't know if that was the right decision or not.
Mm.
I am at this point. I can say I'm grateful that they did that, so I didn't have to be smacked in the face every time
Yeah.
I walked in my house, and I could choose to go into the nursery or not. So I think it was the right decision,
Yeah.
but I don't
Yeah.
know what I would have felt like the other way around. And I say that because at times I felt like I wish they wouldn't have touched anything.
Yeah.
My mom brought home like the blanket that he was wrapped in at the hospital and his clothes and washed them immediately.
Oh,
And so sometimes I was like,
yeah.
no, like I can't smell him and I can't
Yeah.
like his body was touching this, his cells are on this, and like now it's all washed away. But then other times I'm like, well, maybe it's for the best that she did that. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
Like we can't change how things happen, and
Mhm.
it's different for everyone. But um, I what we ended up doing was we did leave that day. We left early afternoon,
Okay.
might have been late afternoon, who knows? I don't know. Sometime it was an afternoon
Yeah.
time where we were leaving the hospital, and I did not feel ready. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to rush anything, and I think my family thought like it'd be best to get her out of here, get her away from this experience, get her
Mm.
somewhere more comfortable. And I was like, no, I don't want to be rushed. This is where I had my baby. Like, I don't even want to leave this space where he was.
Yeah.
Um, but I just, went along with it. I didn't
Mm.
even say these things. I knew I was feeling those things. I knew I was feeling rushed. I knew I didn't like it. I knew I wasn't ready to go. But I was just in a fog and zombie like and going with the motions. And they packed up all the stuff in the room real quick and got me ready to go. And, off we went. And I remember
Mm.
being wheeled out of the hospital and they gave me this little box.
Yeah. The
Like there was
box.
maybe half a sheet of paper big filled with kind of random trinket, like a random baby hat, like that didn't touch him. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And So
Yeah.
they did put like his hospital bracelet in there, and they put a measuring tape in there with his measurement marked on it. But it wasn't the one they used to measure him. It was like another one they grabbed that they marked his measurement on, and they marked
Mhm.
it wrong. They marked it upside down.
Oh,
So I'm like, oh, okay. Um, and they gave me a bag, like a hospital branded bag
mhm.
that was the standard baby bag you give to families. So
Yeah.
it had like a monthly milestones calendar in there.
Oh,
And so here's the thing, I didn't feel sad about that. I
okay.
somehow still felt like it kind of brought me some amount of joy because part of that felt like still acknowledging I just had a baby.
Yes, I was gonna say that bag, you're right, because our hospital does the same thing. You come out and it's a big old plastic bag with, like, all the things in it, right? Like, the care for down below just and, the water bottle and yeah, all of those things, and you walk out and you're like, "Oh, yeah, that person clearly just gave birth." And
Yeah.
yeah, I think I you're right. There's some bit of pride in that.
Yeah, and so but I think it was my mom saw that and she was like, "Oh," and she took it. And I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm supposed to like feel bad about that." I
You're
guess I'm
like, "I
not
don't."
supposed to like receiving that. And so it's interesting how like we get these messages from families, from society, from culture about what to do and what not to do and how to feel and how not to feel. And like that even makes me think of my experience. My room was the room at the very end of the hallway.
Yeah.
Um and they
Oh,
put a flower on the door to show that my baby died,
yeah.
but I could still hear other babies being born in other rooms. And I know it's very unusual to be the person who felt this way, but I wasn't upset by that. I was glad to hear other babies being born and to know that like, okay, life does still go on and
Yeah.
most babies are living and most people aren't going through this. So it actually brought me comfort to
Mm,
hear other babies being born. But that was another instance of like people then being like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can hear babies crying." I'm like, I'm glad they're alive. Like, I'm
yeah.
not mad about
Yeah.
that. I don't feel bad about that. Like, good
Yeah.
for them. And even while I was like walking up and down the halls and stuff, hearing babies, I was like, good, good. I'm glad that they're
That they made it and
delivering
they're
a
fine. Yeah.
live baby. Yeah. So yeah, back to being wheeled out, and I saw this poem recently that I only remember like the last couple of lines of it, but they really stood out to me. Of like, I didn't leave with empty arms. I just left empty. I
Mm,
was like, yeah, I was carrying some stuff, not the baby I should have been carrying.
yeah. Yep.
And then long drive home, and I just looked out the window. I sat in the back seat, didn't say much of anything, and we decided not to go back to our house that day.
Yeah.
We stayed with my aunt for a couple few weeks. I don't know. That's all a blur. I don't remember exactly how long it was that we decided to stay there. But even that first night was horrible. Like my boyfriend, in our case, the loss definitely made a bad relationship worse. That first night he left and he didn't come back home that night,
Oh.
and he went out to like party with some neighbors. And
Oh.
now I can say, no judgment. Everybody has to navigate this in their own way. But at the time, I wanted him to be there for me and
Yeah.
to be together and support me.
Yeah. Yes, that is yeah, that would be hard. That would definitely be hard. You asked for an autopsy and it was
Hmm.
going to be a full autopsy, and I suspect it was largely to do with the fact that you work in this area, so you're like, uh, how long did that take, that information to come back to you? Because it does take time, I think. And, tell me what they found.
So we had both the placental pathology and the autopsy,
Mhm.
and of course the placental pathology came back sooner. So within the first couple of weeks when I went to my first postpartum appointment, they already had those results. And the placental pathology showed some condition that's like the villi that are supposed to develop in the end to help with oxygen supply
Yeah.
to the baby were not developed in the way they should be. They couldn't explain like
Oh.
if they never developed or if they had gotten too old and so they like had started receding.
Oh, okay.
Um, and that condition is called villus maturation defect,
Mhm.
and there are other names for it, which are I don't remember at the moment, but that whatever that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The point is that when it's associated with stillbirth, it usually happens around 37 weeks. So I kept asking, like, well, if that was going to cause my baby to die, then how did he manage to live another 3 weeks?
Yeah.
So, like, to me, that says, like, well, that wasn't the cause. Because, how could a baby live for like 3 more weeks without adequate oxygen supply? Um, so that was really all that came from the placental pathology, and then it took another several weeks for the autopsy to come back. Not as long as it takes for some people, thankfully,
Yeah.
but it was like a couple months, and it was a very thorough, very detailed report. It's about 7 pages long, and all of that to say he was perfect inside and out. Nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
He had this they knew right away from my blood results. He had lost all of his blood volume. So I had a fetal maternal hemorrhage, um,
Oh,
which
okay.
is when um, he bled to death, but it's no. Well, I wasn't bleeding externally. Just all
Yeah.
of his blood was in my blood.
Yeah.
Um, so they knew that right away. But that was another thing where they couldn't explain like
Wha
how that happened, why that happened, when that
Yeah.
happened. Was he slowly losing his blood over a period of time, or was it
Yeah, that's so
instant? Like, just no, like answers, but no answers. Like, and
yes.
why did that happen? And, well, did you fall down? Did you get hurt? No, no,
Nope.
nothing. Because they're like, oh, well, normally, like, we'd see that if you were in an accident and you hit your
Right.
belly or something, or you fell. It's like, nope.
No trauma whatsoever. It's frustrating to have some things that you're like, "This could be it," or,
Mhm.
you know, but
Yeah.
nothing definitive. That can be frustrating because you
And
just
at the Yeah, no, I mean, I think no matter what the diagnosis is, the whys never end,
yeah.
right? Like if you if you are in an accident that causes trauma that causes your baby to die, it's still, well, why did that happen to me?
Yes. Yeah.
Why did
Yes.
I decide to go on that trip to the store on that day at that
Yep.
time? Whatever the case, or umbilical cord accident. Well, why? Why did that happen? Why me?
Yep. The
Why
yeah.
not sooner?
Yeah.
Like those so
There's always this, like, tinge of regret of just, like, why yeah, with that question, especially in the case of stillbirth. Did you end up having any sort of funeral or memorial service for Liam?
yes, we did. And actually tomorrow would be the 7th anniversary of
Oh.
his burial. Um so he was born on the 29th and buried on the 6th. So it all happened very
Mhm.
quickly.
Mhm.
Um we did have a memorial as well, and I remember planning that with my family, and I'm really grateful that my family kind of like took we say in my family there are a lot of
A lot of head chefs and not a lot of sous chefs
yeah,
or
there you
something.
go. Yes, in my family there are a lot of head chefs and not a lot of sous chefs. So in this case, I was grateful for that because everyone just stepped up and stepped in
Mm.
and kind of took over, and everyone sort of fell into their natural role of what they're good at. And so I have an uncle who's a chef, so he kind of took charge of courting, planning the food, and
Oh,
I have a aunt who's involved in religion more than the rest of us, so she kind of took charge of like what readings were going to be done, and so everyone just kind of like stepped in and took on
yeah.
different roles. And through the process, they were asking me a lot of questions, and the overarching theme of what I remember of everything was I don't care. Like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't want to be doing this. I don't
Yes.
want to be planning my baby's funeral. Um, and down to I remember standing in the room and everyone's just like sitting around and they're planning and they're asking me all these questions, just being bombarded with questions to the point that I felt, and I've never otherwise experienced this feeling, but I felt that like literal feeling of the room spinning. Like I thought I was going to pass
Mhm.
out in that moment. And I just remember kind of like walking away. I don't even know if I answered the questions, but I just walked away and like sat down. And I did want to so many instances of like where both two polar opposites exist. Like I didn't want to be planning this funeral at all, and I didn't care about anything, and at the same time I did, and
Yes.
I was thinking to myself like, this is the only time I'm going to be able to plan any type of event for my
For
baby.
him. Mhm. Yep.
And I did make some decisions that I'm really glad I made. For example, at the funeral home, well, number one, even before how it was laid out at the funeral home, they were exploring what venue to have the memorial in,
Mhm.
and they had asked if I wanted to have it at somebody's house. And like very instinctively, I was like, no, absolutely not. Like I don't want to then be visiting that person's house for the rest of who knows how long
And
with that attached to it. Like, this is
yes.
where my baby's memorial was. And so I was like, no, funeral
Yes.
home. And then with the funeral home, I asked that it be set up as in a more like baby friendly manner. So
Oh,
not like the sort of traditional like rows of seats for people, but so it was set up more like a living room, and we brought some of Liam's things in, some like stuffed animals and different things from, baby shower decorations
yeah.
to incorporate into the decor of the room, so it felt a little more baby friendly,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that I did that.
Yeah,
I
that's
requested
really
that,
that's really sweet. And how did the
and
day
then
go? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, and then I was going to go more in depth with that. Then I chose not to go visit him the day before the memorial,
Mhm.
but I did want him to be visited because I didn't like the thought of him being, alone in the funeral home, and so my family went, and then the day of, my partner and I went. Liam was in a separate room, and then there was like the visitation room that was set up like a living room, and then Liam was in a separate room.
Yes. Okay.
And my partner and I went in to see Liam together, and he looked like a sweet angel.
Yeah.
And we had him buried in his baptismal outfit,
Mhm.
and I just couldn't believe how tiny that casket was.
It's
And he
so
had
tiny.
some additional, peeling on his skin and stuff from when we saw him when he was born. That made me more sad to see that. But and then he was so hard, putting
Yeah.
your hand on them, and then they're just so stiff and hard.
Yeah.
Um, we buried him with some other little trinkets like a Simba pillow.
Oh.
My partner had a strong connection of like him with Simba, and so we have a Simba stuffed animal here too.
Uh-huh.
That makes me think a lot of Liam. But then the Simba pillow was buried with him, and some other little things. My partner's a big Bears fan, so he was buried wearing wearing a Bears beanie,
Oh, that's pretty cute.
and like a DIY one too because I couldn't find one
Yeah.
small enough. So they found like a small baby beanie and like glued the bear
That's great.
onto the
That's
front of it.
perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah. And so then it was my partner and I and my close family and friends arrived first, and we visited with Liam, and then other people would go into the room, and they I don't remember like the decision of keeping him in the separate room or not. I think that had to have been a decision that I made at some point,
Yeah.
but I feel like it was almost probably a decision that was like suggested to me,
Mm.
um, tying into like the secrecy and
Yeah.
taboo of dead babies, and like, well, let's
Yep.
keep him in a separate room because that'll be hard to have him in the
Yep.
other room. And then people were asking me like, "Well, can we see him?" And I said, "Yes." Everyone was like, "Yeah, he's in there. Go see him." And part of me was like, "That's really sweet that people are asking me, but also, why? Like, when there's a memorial service, like, there's a dead person there, and you go see them. Like, you don't have to ask. Like, that's what you're here for."
Yeah, please do.
Um, but yeah, that people were going in and saying their goodbyes and seeing him, and it was really sweet and touching, like how many people wanted to see him
Yeah, that's great.
and say their goodbyes too. And I was very pleasantly surprised by how many people showed up for me and my family and Liam, and it was a beautiful service.
That's great. Anything that stood out that you particularly liked or anything that anybody said?
I liked a number of different things stood out. So number one, just like looking around the room as the service is happening
Mhm.
and seeing so many people and so many people that I love and who I knew love me, and just like seeing them show up in that way meant so much to me. And also seeing people who maybe knew me like many years ago, or like knew me through my parents or through a relative or something, who said, "Oh, I heard about Liam and wanted to just come and show my
Oh,
support." So and even some strangers, like there was someone from the next room over who like heard what the service was, who came over to,
oh,
extend their condolences. And um yeah, like that was just so touching, and I felt so supported. The midwife who delivered Liam, she came, my doula came, just friends, family, colleagues, strangers, just so many people, and that was really, really sweet. My friend brought came with her little kids,
mhm.
and that again was comforting to me. Like I was happy to see them.
Yeah,
And then, later heard from family like how they said like, "Oh, we thought that was kind of insensitive of her to bring in her little kids." They were little like toddlers,
yeah,
maybe barely toddlers at the time. Um, so they thought it wasn't like insensitive to bring like a little, bring a baby to a baby funeral, like
yeah,
because it would hurt me. But I was like, no, like I was happy to see
yeah,
my friend and her baby, and that was comforting for me. So the moment they did bring Liam into like the living room where the service took place,
yeah.
um, for the service. So they closed his casket and brought him into the room. And I think that was such an impactful moment for everyone to see, people, not everyone who came saw Liam in the other room. So I think for people to like see this little tiny baby casket being carried in
Yeah.
was like you could feel it in the room.
It's so shocking how small it is, you know? And Anna, thank you so much for sharing such a beautiful story of Liam, and I'm so sorry that he didn't get to hang out here with us, and I really appreciate you sharing his story because I think it will bring comfort to others. Is there any last things that you or anything you'd like to say about Liam or as we close up this interview?
Ah, my goodness. Well, I mean, there's like his story didn't end, right? Like he we had his memorial, then we buried him. That was another beautiful service with a smaller group of people. It was more intimate ceremony there. And then from there, I immediately just started building his legacy since he wasn't here to
Yeah.
live one out on his own, and have continued to do that every day for 7 years.
And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that on our next episode. So, but yes, when they're not here, we do it for them, right?
Yeah.
Thank you again, Anna. That was wonderful, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here and to be able to share his story.